Hello there, it's Jo from Minerva. Today we're going to have a look at back pockets on jeans. There are back pockets on other trousers other than jeans, but you might have the opportunity to customise and create your own design when you make your own jeans or your own trousers which have back pockets on. You might decide to customise, create and craft your own back pockets either with hand stitching, machine stitching, a twin needle. You might try some top stitching thread. You could even try, maybe if you have a sewing machine with lots of different decorative features on it, having a go at using those to decorate back pockets. Jeans patterns that you might do this on are the Jesser jeans by Tilly and the Buttons, the True Bias Lander pants, closet cord ginger jeans. Today I'm using the Megan Nielsen Dawn jeans pattern to customise my back pockets. If you do decide to hand sew your back pockets, then it's a good idea to have some new hand sewing needles, because you're going to be going through a thick layer of denim, and also to sew with a top stitching thread or a Pearl 8 thread. Pearl 8 thread's a little bit thicker. I've used a top stitching thread today for my hand sewing because that will match my top stitching thread on my jeans. You might also take a look at our Sashiko templates. They're a sort of plastic template that you can put on top of your pocket and create a pattern, but there's lots of different ways, and I'm going to show you today how to get your design onto your pocket. If you've done any kind of hand sewing on pockets, try and keep the back as tidy as you can, but if you just put that straight onto your jeans, if you put things in your back pockets, then you might catch these threads and pucker them on the right side. So it's a good idea to cut a piece of interfacing, not thick, because you're going to be folding over the edges of this pocket. And you can cut the seam allowances off a little bit. I can trim that down a little bit more. And if you make sure that the interfacing goes underneath the top stitch on the top of the pocket, and press that down so that all of your hand stitching is protected. So if you slide your phone in and out of your pocket, you won't catch the stitching. So that's a hand stitch pocket. I've used a template and I've used top stitching thread as my hand stitching thread, which is just the right thickness for hand stitching, and it will also tie in with the top stitching on my jeans. If you have higher skills than just a running Sashiko stitch, then you could actually embroider your back pocket. So you can use an embroidery floss and use the same techniques as the hand sewing one. So you could use floral designs, geometric designs, little cute cartoons or letters from your name. But whatever you do, you will still need to put the interfacing on the back so that you enclose all the hand stitching on the back of your pocket. Here's a lovely example. Lots of patterns just suggest that you top stitch around the edge of your back pocket, but if you want to create your own designs, then here's how you can get some paper and pencils and get some ideas down. So if you want to make your own designs, then trace off your pocket. It's a good idea to trace off your seam allowance as well, so that you know exactly the sort of creative area that you've got to use, because you don't want a pattern that goes right to the edge and then you've got to try and fold it under. So trace off your pocket and then you can have a go at your designs. I've just been having a mess around here, trying some different ones. So I'm going to try and get a heart shape. To have on my pocket. Try and keep it quite smooth. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. You can do it scooting off somewhere else. You can have extra shape. It depends if you're going to hand stitch it or machine stitch it. And then when you want to transfer it to your pocket, you can use a carbon paper. You put the carbon paper in your pocket and then you can match up your pocket placement. Make sure that's in the right place, or my heart won't be in the right place. And then you can either use a pen to trace through, pressing quite firmly so that you get a good print through from your carbon paper. Or if you've got a straighter design, like a zigzag sort of style, you can use a carbon wheel. You'll get the markings faintly onto your pocket, and then you can use the dressmaking pencil chalk to put them or grade them out where you want them. And that can be stitched on the sewing machine, which means that you won't have to put any interfacing on the back because it will be pretty smooth. To get an opposite one, then you'll need to flip your paper over so that your other pocket has the design in an opposite formation. So you can completely design your own pocket. If you think you might be using the twin needle on your sewing machine, then you can put two pencils together and you can make your own designs like this. And they're quite a good way of sort of seeing what your design will look like in top stitching thread. And then again, if you flip it over, your waves will go in the opposite direction. So that's quite a good way of making your own design. If full-on hand stitching and machine embroidery isn't your thing, then you can just customise your back pockets with a little label. So you can insert a little tab label inside the side of your pocket. It can say something. You can use a little bit of your favourite fabric. You can use the selvage edge off the side of some fabric. You can really sort of go to town, and you can use ribbon. You can do all sorts of little tabs on the sides of your back pockets. Here's an example. Okay, what if you do have some decorative stitches on your sewing machine? Let's have a look at how we could use those. If you want to have a go at top stitching your pocket, so this is the design that I did before, then you might want a few tips for loading up a top stitching thread, because top stitching thread can be a real nuisance on some sewing machines, and it can be really frustrating because it's pulling on the bobbin thread. You might not know which way round to put the threads. So you need a top stitching needle, and a top stitching sewing needle has a slightly bigger eye. So when you try to get this thicker thread through it, it can run through really smoothly, so you get a really smooth sew. if you try to put top stitching thread through a normal universal needle, it will like shred the thread because the thread is too thick to go through the eye of the needle. So a top stitching needle has a larger eye than a normal needle. So I've loaded up the top stitching thread on my machine on the top, but I have a normal bobbin thread in the bottom. You might want to make the stitch length a little bit longer so that you can really see the stitches, so that it does look like sort of that hand stitching or that sort of cowboy sort of stitching. If it's all close and bunched up, it doesn't really show off the running stitch of the machine. So you will always need to test a bit on a piece of test fabric. I've got a few little strips here that I've been testing on, and I have turned the tension down a little bit so it's just below 4. Normally I keep it on 4 and I don't mess around with my tension very much, but just because I'm pulling through a thicker thread, then I've just turned the tension down a little bit. Let's see what sort of stitch quality we can get. It's a good idea not to go forwards and back with the top stitching thread because you'll get a really thick lump and an area that you can see. So it's a good idea to tie your threads on the back, so leave a long tail and pull your threads through to the reverse of the fabric. For curves, you need to go quite slowly because you don't want to have any little kinks in your design. If you've got a really detailed design, like sort of say a flower with lots of petals, then you might want to drop the feed dogs on your sewing machine if you can. That's those little zigzag bits, and you can free motion embroidery. Or you might need to keep moving the foot up and down and just doing a couple of stitches at a time so that you don't get any kinks in your design. If you pull on the bobbin thread, it will pull the top stitching thread to the reverse, and you can tie them off without getting a sort of really thick colour of the thread on the right side. So now this can be seamless here. So I could keep working on that. I could put the second layer in, I could have a double layer inside, but that's how you use a top stitching thread. If you use a decorative stitch on your machine, I've got quite a few. Sometimes you've just got a zigzag, but you could use zigzags really nicely on a back pocket if you make them really narrow or you make them wider. I'm going to show you some of these stitches on here, just really so that I can show you how to run the thread and how to make sure that you get a design that's desirable. So I need to change the foot on my machine because when I put the stitch selection on, it tells me which foot to use, and I need to change to a different foot that's got a more open front so that it can create the design with the needle. I'm going to have a little practice first, threads at the back, and see what happens. Okay, so here's a little example of what I'd like to show you about top stitching thread. So can you see the black from the bobbin is on the right side? Too much of it is pulling through, so I need to put my tension back more towards 4. So I'm going to have another little practice. So I tried a few things, change the tension, change the stitch length, and I was still getting a lot of bobbin thread pulling through. So for my machine embroidery, I put top stitching thread in the top and the bottom, and I'm getting a really nice design. A little bit squiffy, but I'm getting the flower, swirl, flower, swirl. So that would work on a back pocket. Let's see what it would look like. So across the top of the pocket, I've got this decorative stitch. I could do lots of different decorative stitches. So I could do rows and rows and rows of different ones. I could do a sort of section of decorative stitch across the top, and I could definitely twin needle across the top of the pocket to hold that down. That's just tacked at the moment, and that's the back look. And you shouldn't need to put a piece of interfacing on the back of here because that won't come undone. If you've got this denim's got a little bit of stretch in it, So if your machine sewing is rippling your fabric, you might want to lightly interface it before you machine stitch it. So there's a couple of machine techniques. The more preparation you put into your back pockets, the better they will be. All the preparation makes for a really good pocket. If you just press under your edges and sew it on, then you can get sort of your pocket a little bit twisted or not in the position that you want. So make sure you do all the prep. So you need to be doing the top stitching first, because you can't top stitch it after you've attached it. And so you top stitch first, then press under 1.5 seam allowance, and I'm going to just tack that in place so that I can take the pins out, and then I can really concentrate on sewing carefully under the machine rather than trying to dodge pins. So if you want to do anything now, machine stitching, top stitching thread, embroidery, floss embroidery, all of that is to do at this stage. When you come to attach your pocket, you'll be pressing under the seam allowance and tacking that seam allowance down. You will have a marking for back pockets. I tend to mark the top. You know, I didn't mark the bottom because I sort of thought once I'd got the angle of the top, I would be in the right place. I'm going to make sure all of those little bits of thread from the top stitching are all enclosed. And now I'm going to put 2 layers of top stitching all the way around. Again, as part of your preparation, it might be a good idea to pencil chalk where you're going to do your top stitching, especially on that point. You want to make sure that your point is the same for both of your rows of top stitching. You can use a twin needle, of course. If you're getting quite a thick lump here and here, you can bash that with a hammer from the wrong side. So if you hit here with a hammer with the wrong side, you'll distress the weave of the fabric a little bit, and it makes it a little bit softer to sew through. So 2 layers of top stitching to finish off your pockets. I'm using the edge of my metal foot. I've got a plastic piece in the middle, so I'm using that to run along my first line of stitching. So that the distance remains the same. Once you've attached it, you can remove all of your tacking and then pull the threads to the wrong side and then tie your threads at the back. If you have used a bobbin thread, then I like to keep my top stitching ones separate because I don't want to end up putting that in the machine for something else. So those are my top stitching threads and bobbins, and I'm going to keep those separate. If you are making a whole pair of jeans, then you'll probably need a couple of top stitching reels because they don't have quite so much thread on as a normal spool. And you do use quite a lot, you know, if you're doing 2 lines of stitching, you know, on the inside of the jeans, you've got flat felled seams, you've got all around your pockets, all around your waistband and your belt loops. So when you order your jeans kit, make sure you get a couple of top stitching threads. There are just a few ideas for you to try out if you want to create your own back pocket. They are super, super unique if you can make them yourself. Of course, we need to generate some ideas. So if you've made a back pocket and you've created your own design, we would love to see it. So do create an account with us and upload your makes and projects. While you're there at Minerva, do check out our promotions and discounts that are on every month. Thank you very much for watching.